Hey there, hope all is well. Back at you today with some more RT News updates. And as you can tell from today's title, carrying the debt load of $20 trillion plus and what that means to you, I'm going to cover a couple of recent articles dealing with the historical landmark we just hit as a nation of surpassing $20 trillion and with no end in sight, as well as rewinding back through history as to why I'm wearing this shirt with Andrew Jackson and give you a little bit of history on the debt idea and how we were once debt free. So other than that, I want to just give you some information on what's happening with this debt, share my thoughts with it, and also get your take on this debt and how it will impact you. And so it's a lot of ramifications to the debt ceiling being removed. So I want to just share some thoughts with that. But always, before I get into those articles, I want to encourage you to click the subscribe button for more RT News updates, as well as hit the notification tab to be informed the next time I record some news or give it an interview. And also, I want to encourage you to visit the RTD University, where I have put together all of my prior interviews into one simple page where you can get an understanding of what it means to rethink the dollar, as well as to prepare for your future, being that the days ahead will be rough as this debt continues to pile on. Let's dive into today's news. So today I got a couple articles I want to share with you, but also I want to actually take a look at the U.S. debt clock to kind of give you an idea of what I mean by 20 trillion plus and counting. And so as you're familiar with, the whole idea the debt ceiling was raised, and so it's been temporarily pushed aside up until December, is where Congress is going to get together again and try to figure out how to then come up with a ideal amount of money to then borrow just to pay bills. But just an actual visualization of $20 trillion, what it looks like and where it's going, and how most of the people are not even aware of the fact that we're taking on debt that we cannot pay back. And the people who are actually carrying the debt load in and of themselves are the people who actually save in the national currency known as the Federal Reserve note, or aka the dollar. And so at the end of the day, the government borrows, the Federal Reserve prints, and central banks 10x the currency through fractional reserve banking. And then we, the citizens, are encouraged to be good financial stewards of our personal finances by saving and investing in things like that. But yet we're saving the very same thing that they're easily borrowing from the feds, and the feds is printing. So at the end of the day, the people are the ones that actually carry the load, because our lives is wrapped around the fact that we are dependent upon the Federal Reserve note as of now. And so I believe that this idea of continuing to borrow will come to an end, because as you see from prior videos and all my interviews from other people, the world is moving on beyond the dollar. And so once they decide to basically come to the conclusion that these debts that the governments are borrowing will not be able to be repaid, there will be, as some of my guests say, an economic shift or monetary reset or something of that nature, which has happened throughout history before. So it's nothing new. But yet my fear is that most of the people who are dependent upon the promises that were made to them, they will be the most upset. And so also me being a parent, I'm very concerned with the future that my children will have, being that they have been born into a system that has borrowed, that has reached into the future to borrow upon their backs. And they're going to be the ones also to carry some of that burden as well. So let me get into some of these articles here. And the very first one, I want to just touch on a debt clock. Most of you guys, I'm sure, are familiar with that, but yet I was kind of looking at it and kind of trying to dissect it a little bit, and just seeing this number here at 20 trillion, which is our U.S. national debt. And so for the longest, it was well below 19. And so this national debt here goes beyond political parties. So it doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat. Either one, whoever comes into office is responsible for paying the bills that they inherit as president, and it all has to do with borrowing. And so just to kind of break down some of the figures here. And so here we have, total spending for the year is around $4 trillion. And in revenue, as far as what the government brings in through taxation, which includes income tax, payroll tax, corporate tax, is about 3.3 billion. If you bring in 3, but responsible for spending 4, and there's a deficit there, which leads to the idea that we're close to $1 trillion in the negative, which means we have to find that money somewhere. And so that's hence the idea of borrowing more than what we will ever be able to repay back. And then why are we borrowing these things? Because we have bills to pay. And a lot of these bills are things that are not even owed to the younger generation. So you have Medicaid, Medicare, you have Social Security, you have our defense and war, you have federal pensions, so you have all these extra costs that the government is responsible for paying for because of promises made to prior generations, of which the workers of today and the children in our future workers will be the ones responsible for paying this stuff back, which is kind of the flawed system we live in. But then on our idea of debt, as a consumer, as a citizen myself, I'm responsible for my own personal finances, and the right thing to do is to live within your means, to stay well within what you can afford. But yet when it comes to our government and how our monetary system operates, that's not the case. And so if you look at just debt in general, total personal debt is close to $18+ trillion, which includes mortgages from an inflated housing market. You have student loan debt at 1.4 all-time highs from us encouraging kids to go to school to get jobs that may not be there. And as most kids are finding out now, they're not really as plentiful as they were told. Then we have credit card debt because, most people aren't making the type of money they were making prior to the financial crisis, and then all of the prior years. More people are less disposable income, so they're borrowing more, which giving us, a personal debt per citizen of $56,000. So that's just kind of some of the things on the surface that, when it comes to debt, the government isn't responsible for being good stewards of our national currency, but yet us as citizens, we're responsible for our own personal finances with that same currency that they're borrowing into oblivion. And so the reason I'm wearing this Andrew Jackson shirt is because of his whole motto or proposing the importance of being debt free. So in our entire history, he's the only president that ever really kind of fought against the idea of having a national debt, especially a privately held national debt through the central bank, as such as it is now. And so just to go back, give you a little history, here's an article I pulled up from a couple years ago, but it deals with the fact that, in 1835, for about 1 year, we were debt free. And what really stood out was, Andrew Jackson's viewpoint on debt. And so if you were to read through this article here, he considered it a national curse. And so if you click on this link here, it actually takes you to his biography. And then if you scroll down from there, it gives you a little bit more in depth as to his thought process on debt. And it says, most important of all, President Jackson paid off the national debt, the one and only time the national debt was nation was out of debt. It says not a penny was owed to anyone, foreign or domestic. A national debt, he wrote in 1824, is a national curse. And my vow, if I become president, shall be to pay the national debt. And so just the fact that he considered a national curse. And so for the longest now, our monetary system and our way of thinking is that debt is, in regards to borrowing just to pay interest, never to actually touch the principal, is a normal thing, in which it's good to the point where it's beyond sustainable and it cannot go on forever. And so just to keep on moving a little bit to some more articles, so the argument on mainstream news nowadays that the debt ceiling has been raised is, what would it mean to erase the debt ceiling? And so the idea that the debt ceiling is something that kind of gets in politicians' way pretty much every year, because it gives them a chance to get together and to bicker over what what the party, whether Democrat or Republic, what they need as far as some compromises and things like that. So it's become more of a political show than anything else. And so this article here presents the truth as to why the debt ceiling is irrelevant. When it says here, it says, what would it mean to eliminate the debt limit? And so it says, he's quoted, in all honesty, it would mean absolutely nothing, says Steve Bell, a senior advisor. It has never worked, said Bell, who previously served as a Senate Budget Committee. It says the debt limit as a legislative vehicle to slow down spending has been an utter failure and counterproductive. It says technically, repealing it would mean that Congress doesn't set a cap on the amount of money the government borrows just to pay its bills. So the idea that the whole debt ceiling is something that can help the government better budget and kind of be fiscally responsible is absurd, because they have to borrow in order to pay bills. So just a little bit more insight here. Here's another article here from Florida Weekly. And what stood out to me on this one was the fact that it says, if Congress did not authorize an increase to the debt ceiling, it will be analogous to you being at your credit limit on your Visa card and having automatic payments on your cable bill, Netflix subscription, and insurance premium coming up the next day. Something will not get paid. So for the most part, the bills are going to come due, so they have to have the money there to pay them, which means they're going to continue to borrow. So back to the debt clock, just to give you an idea of how absurd this is, that the national debt is something good for us. What it boils down to at the end of the day is the people who will carry this debt are you and I. We're the citizens. Because at the end of the day, this debt is monetized and it's turned into our currency, or to, as I mentioned with the commercial banking, 10x in the currency as far as fractional reserve banking, expanding the monetary supply in digital dollars. And so at the end of the day, it always comes back to on us, because it's a reflection of the cost of our living. It becomes more expensive. And so one thing to pay attention to here is the monetary base in 2017. It's $3.7 trillion. It's up 533% since 2000. And just to give an idea of what that means, it says the total amount of currency that is either circulated in the hands of the public or in commercial banks deposits held in the central bank reserves. So there's more, digits being brought into existence out of nowhere, simply because our government borrows money. And so a Federal Reserve note in and of itself is a reflection of a debt that was brought into existence, i.e. this debt ceiling situation here. And then to go over here, in the U.S. population, there's 325 citizens currently as of now, of which 153 are in the workforce, and there's 94,497,486 not even in the workforce. So basically 1/3 of our population is not even truly employed. And so that right there takes away from the tax revenue, which points at the fact that there'll never be enough money generated to actually begin helping cut into the deficit that we have, being that we have so many entitlement spendings to cover, which means the debt will continue to rise. And as it rises, governments, other nations who recognize that we are just out of hand, if they end up removing a ceiling, will, for the most part, decide to just say, hey, we're done lending money or, taking on your debt for you and allowing you to just print willy-nilly. And so we're going to move away from the dollar, such as nations like Venezuela, who are becoming more economically diversified, as the articles that just came out today said, as well as all the shift out east was what the Asian nation is going with, Silk Belt Road, things like that. So those are all things happening. And so the load, who's carrying the load? You and I. So I would love to get your thoughts on this debt ceiling fiasco. I always ask my guests when I interview them, how high do you think it can go? And so most of them say it can go as high as the people have confidence in utilizing the paper allows it. So as long as we continue to have confidence or misunderstanding in our national currency and how it's basically robbing us, we'll continue to allow this to happen. And in the meantime, while this happens, things will become very hard as far as when the cost of living go up. So this is just what's happening in the news. I wanted to shine some light on this. I never really covered the debt ceiling in a while. So just wanted to actually show you some figures, get your thoughts on it. So how high do you think it would go? Is it 20, 30 trillion? Because typically, we're not even in a financial crisis type of mode, and the debt is, continue to increase very rapidly. So usually when there's some type of crisis or something like that, that's when debt really ramped up. And so the question would be, is when we hit a recession, how high will it be spiked up when the Fed has to begin quantitative easing or something of that nature to inject a lot of funny money into the system, which is going to only speed up this national debt clock even more, which is why people should begin taking a look at outside of conventional fractional reserve banking through commercial banking and really begin checking into more sound money banking with various options, such as actually holding physical metal in your possession other than our current national currency of the Federal Reserve note. So just want to share my thoughts. I would love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below. Let me know what you think. And other than that, look forward to bringing you more news. Thanks.